Hello and welcome to the Problem Gambling Podcast. I'm Barry Grant, an addiction counselor with Extern Problem Gambling. My co-host is Claire Donegan, project lead with the Women's Gambling Support Network, and she's also doing a master's in addiction counseling at the moment. And our guest today is Niall Davison from County Down, and he's the author of a really interesting book that's going to be coming out shortly, called I've Got a Tip, Lads, Winning Gamblers Lose Too. So, Niall, you're the first person of the many, many, many guests that we've had on the podcast who could confidently call themselves a winning gambler. How did that happen? How did that come about? It's a very rare thing.
Um, well, first of all, Barry, I would say I was a financially profitable gambler for about a decade. I certainly wouldn't say I was successful because I don't think there's any sort of success can come from a 15-year addiction, which is essentially what it was. Um, but basically, it all came to head in 2022 when at an online tipping column that I ran on Facebook, and then I did a bit of tipping for a horse racing syndicate website as well. And it started off just about 2013, just between me and a few friends, and then it escalated and it grew like a mushroom, and then like, there's about 800 members now, so it didn't go like ultra viral or anything, but it was still enough of an audience online to make my ego swell and sort of get lost a bit in the audience capture of it all. But ultimately, I was heavily restricted from betting with any online bookmaker. Once you start to show that you're making a profit, they restrict or close your account completely. But it was I don't want my story just to be about, you know, it was those ghastly bookmakers that restricted me in it all. Like a young footballer who gets an injury at 17 and he would have made it if it wasn't for his injury. My story was one of a lack of discipline as well in the end, and I just had a maybe 2022. My betting was either ringing up friends to put bets on for me or driving around all the different boys sports in Belfast and County Down just to put like separate my bets, so like £30 each way in one shop and £30 each way in another shop, so not to draw attention to myself. But ultimately, in 2022, during the Goodwood and Galway festivals in July and August, I just had a betting week from hell where just nothing went right whatsoever. And and I'd had these runs before where I'd done my money. And I think this is something that people don't quite understand sometimes, is that even if your annual profit shows, your annual tally shows that you're winning, it's still like a roller. The whole season is like a roller coaster. So you'll have periods where you go on a long losing run, and there's a few times over the years, like probably 5 or 6 times in that sort of 10 to 15 year period, where I wiped myself out, financially. And I didn't. I think the difference between me and sort of like Tony or Paul Buck or and Jimmy Smith, all these guys that you've had on, Patrick Foster, was I never let myself get into it. When I lost my money, I was always good at going to ground and waiting for the next right bet. I was never like stealing money or getting myself into any financial difficulty. And I was probably at my best when my back was against the wall, because then I would be forced discipline, rather than showing steady discipline throughout. But like most gamblers, I was capable of chasing, and my next bet would, when you had a winner, the next bet would be a bigger bet, and over. I woke up on my 42nd birthday and just realized that there's no end to this whatsoever. Like I know you've had Rob from One Day at a Time on. He's a saying that wins are just future losses. And that's ultimately that's what it is. And I did my money in 2022, and then I had this epiphany that this just never ends, and I'll get myself back in the game because it was good enough to get myself back in the game. I'd done it many times, but I knew eventually, like every gambler will go on a bad run through uh, bad luck, bad judgment, and lack of discipline. And when those losers stack up, it's easy to press the fuck it button basically, and it just it all goes tits up. And I just realized that I have nothing to show for this. Like I can't bet with any bookmakers online. My bank account's empty. Um, and I just decided I needed to do something else with my life. And then so I went on a period of abstinence, which was initially a month. It stretched the 3 months, and then the Cheltenham Festival came around, and then I sort of got back into it for another year. I went through all the different stages of change model, and then I finally had my last ever bet in April 2024. And I actually quit drinking alcohol in the same year, 2020, well, 2023. I'm not saying you can't quit betting and you can still drink, but it does make things a lot easier because yeah, when you're three sheets to the wind, you tend to make bad decisions. So so yeah, that's how it all sort of ended for me. And then from 20 at the start of 2024, I started writing the book. I've got a tip, lads, winning gamblers lose too, and it's just, I thought there was a gap in the market for someone who was financially successful, but that ended up just really you can't really win in this game at all, and you're going to be left with no betting accounts and probably no money. So that's I can take it back to the start, but that's basically how it ended.
Yeah, definitely. We should go back to the start as well. But like, it's so interesting that like the preoccupation part is so damaging in and of itself that even if you're not, losing money over the course of a year, you're a net profit at the end of the year. The preoccupation is so damaging in and of itself that the fact that you're in profit doesn't really mitigate the fact that you're obsessed with this thing. You know what I mean? So, and like I remember meeting a young guy years ago. He'd kind of gotten into online poker before he even ended up getting into the gambling addiction space. And he got into online poker in the early days, and found he was really good at it and was making loads of money. And was running online poker schools and making more money from that. He was still in his early 20s at this stage. And most of the kind of best games were on in US time, so he was staying up through the night and sleeping through the day, and his lifestyle was horrific, like terrible lifestyle, no self-care. And he just completely burnt himself out after a couple of years. Like he ended up in the hospital, and the doctors were like, "You need to just radically change your lifestyle." And he just pulled the plug on it. He made a good amount of money, went off to Thailand or somewhere. And so he was a successful gambler. Like he was winning more than he was losing. He was, had these card schools, living the dream essentially, but you still have to be totally preoccupied by the thing. And then is the juice worth the squeeze, And of course, you're talking about the roller coaster ride as well. So, like, let's say on the 31st of December, you're in profit, but there could have been periods through the year when you were, hitting zero or getting very close to zero. And it is that roller coaster ride, the highs, the lows, the highs, the lows, and maybe some profit at the end. Or Tony, you mentioned Tony O'Reilly gives the example that one of the 10 years that he was gambling online with Paddy Power, he was in profit, having put 10.5 million through the account. And that one year that he was in profit was somewhere between 40 and 50 euros. Like, and how much time was he spending in that year? How much preoccupation? How many lies did he have to tell? All the money that he stole, all the plays that he had to keep spinning to be in profit, 40 something euro in an account where, he'd lodged maybe 2 million. His churn of bets was 10.5 million. He had a massive amount of winning bets. But as you said, Rob Minnick, from One Day at a Time says, today's win is tomorrow's future loss, so there's loads of really good stuff in there. So, are Claire, any thoughts or observations on what Niall's been saying so far?
I have so many questions because I don't know your background, Niall, so I'm just hearing it now. And I think the first thing that's coming to mind is, was there a job alongside this that was funding all of this, or how did this work?
Oh yeah. So basically, I went to university in Durham, so I did a sports science degree, and I was I graduated in 2002. So, but after university, I wasn't ready to grow up. I was very emotionally immature, and all my friends after university went on to do great things in their careers, where I was sort of bumming around in dead end jobs. I was driving a fan for JD Sports, delivering to all parts of Ireland, and then had a brief career as a personal trainer because my degree was in sports science. So I decided I may as well try and do something with my degree. But then uh, I hated it. I absolutely hated being a personal trainer. I wasn't bad at it, I just hated it. Uh, and then I actually met one of my PT clients. It was a Scottish girl. Uh, and one night we were on in Fitness First gym, and the TVs were on, and she said they had a horse racing on one of the TVs, and she said, "Oh, there's the 2-year-olds having their first runs at Newmarket." And I was like, "What are you some sort of gambler, eh?" Fidette, her name was, and she said, "Oh, I was the number one tipster in the UK for 2 years running," which I took with a pinch of salt, but I was like, I was intrigued. So I said, "How did it work?" So she says, "Bring in a copy of the Racing Post tomorrow, and I'll show you how it works." So she had this whole system planned out about uh, how she could beat the bookies with this system, and ultimately it was a load of shit. But it meant I was buying the Racing Post every single day, and and then I just got more and more into it, and it was in summer of 2007. I know Tony has his own story about the Derby of 2007 when Authorized won, and he was waiting on that bet for to pay for his wedding. He was in deep financial shit, and so I had my own Authorized story, not quite the sums Tony was talking about, but I had a double on the Oaks and the Derby. So a horse called Light Shift at 13-2, and then Authorized the favourite at 5-4, and it was just like a £15 double. But they both won, and that paid me like £250, and I was charging £25 for a PT session. So I was like, "That's yeah, that's the answer. That's there's 10 PT sessions just for putting on a £15 bet." So then I quit the PT job and went back to. I rang my old boss at JD and went back and said, "Can I start working there again?" He said, "Yeah, you can start next week. Try the driving job." So I went back to that, and that just gave me more free time because I finished at 2 o'clock every day. It was 6 o'clock to 2 o'clock, and I was just get more and more immersed in horse racing. And I actually gave from 2007 to 2012. I gave myself a goal of right. I'm going to become an expert in this. I'm going to use 5 years, and I read loads of books on it. I emailed Racing UK and at the races, just trying to get as much information about horse racing as I could. Um, and then I did ultimately get good at it, and then had a couple of big wins that sort of those first 5 years it was treading water, but I had a couple of big wins that blasted me out of my overdraft, and then I was thinking, right, I can subsidize my sort of crappy job with this extra income coming in from gambling. So in 2012, then I did like a £30 bet that won 4,500. And then for me, that was the starting point. I was like, right, that's the foundation to move forward. And it actually was because for the next 10 years, then I was financially in profit, but with it came all the betting restrictions as well. And then I started my tipping column on Facebook in 2013. Uh, and in that same year, I actually started the job I'm working in now at a ship chandler company in Belfast, and it's I worked my way up in the company, and now I have a very good job, and I'm pretty well paid to do it, and I'm good at my job. But behind the scenes, I was still in this gambling addiction that just never. And you're saying preoccupation, Barry, like it never let up for a minute. Like just constantly checking odds checker, watching racing replays, the weather forecasts. Like it just never. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up and then leave my wife in the bedroom and go next door into the spare room and I'd be watching replays, listening to podcasts. It just completely consumed me. And anytime I was having a conversation with anyone else in my life, I'd always be at least 20% somewhere else. It was just like just constant. And so, sorry, Claire, I've just gone off on a bit of a tangent there. But to answer your question, yes, I have a day job. I've had a few day jobs, but I've been in this one for the last 13 years, and I love it. And uh, ultimately, I never needed gambling because I'm pretty well paid to do this job, but it just could not stop.
Which is, yeah, understandable, of course. Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, that was my, I suppose, point, is this, was this your full-time income at the time, or was there something kind of supplementing on the side? Because like you say, every minute was going into this, every moment of your life. And you mentioned your wife, so I mean, did they notice anything at the time? Did they know about this?
Oh yeah,
Like your family?
like everyone knew I liked the bet, and like, but no one knew the lengths I would go to like to find winning bets, which was ultimately what my addiction was. Now, when I read stories like Tony's or Patrick Foster, and they're placing these multiple bets, like 77 bets a day or whatever, that wasn't me. I probably placed, between 5 and 10 bets a week, and it was 95% of that was in horse racing. So it was the constant studying of the form, and then I sort of touched on it earlier, just that for me, it was the adulation that came with it in Facebook, like, and my numbers grew and my numbers grew, and it just all went in my head, and then that meant I needed to study more and more and just find more winners for my members, and that was like for me, this was after spending so many years in dead end jobs, it was like this is my calling, this is my vocation. But it turned me into a bit of a selfish prick as well. And my wife would say things like, that's all you ever think about. And then I would say, "Well, am I not allowed to have a hobby? I'm not allowed." And but of course, she was 100% right that's all I did ever think about. Having said that, I wore the mask well a lot of the time, which I think a lot of gamblers do, because they call it the hidden addiction or the secret addiction, and I was quite good at hiding it. But when I had one of those long losing runs, like my mood would change, and she could pick up on it. So um, she's much more happy with the new version of me that since I quit.
Yeah, the tipsters thing is interesting because like I've been doing this for quite a while now. Like a lot of people that I've worked with over the years will follow tipsters and they go, okay, well this, the tipsters, different tipsters are kind of put up, how they're doing, how they did this week and how they did this month and how they did it over the year and all this sort of stuff. And, let's assume that it's kind of genuine information. And then the person can look at that and go, well, this person's making a profit and I want to make a profit from my gambling. And, some of the tipsters will say, well, these are your stakes and you should be doing these sort of stakes and do these bets or do it as an each way rather than betting to win and blah blah blah. Very specific, granular uh, instructions. And for a lot of people that I've worked with over the years, they'll start out following the tipster's exact instructions and they'll win some money. But then it gets boring because following exact instructions is not risk taking, which is the buzz that most people get off gambling. Is the risk is the reward, right? For most people, there are some very disciplined people, and you're talking about doing 5 to 10 bets a week. I mean, like that would require a lot of discipline, and a lot of studying, a lot of waiting, a lot of patience, and all that sort of stuff, which a lot of people who develop gambling problems don't have or struggle with. So they start off following the tipsters, they win some money, and then they go off script and they start doing their own thing. And one of two things will happen. They'll either win, in which case they go, this is much better than staying on the tipster script, or they'll lose and then they'll be so pissed off having lost their money that they gained from essentially doing something more sensible and start chasing that loss, and then how that goes as well. But I've always found the tipster thing interesting, and also like some tipsters are also affiliates. I would have concerns about some of the
Mm.
affiliates and the sort of tips that they might be giving out, because affiliates, if you're listening to this and you've ever clicked on an affiliate link, affiliates make about 30% of your lifetime losses. So there's a perverse incentive there to make sure that you make more losses than wins. So if your affiliate, your tipster is trying to get you to click on their affiliate link, I will be a little bit wary of that, dear listener and viewer. Or do you have any thoughts on any of that stuff, like the kind of tipster market and that whole
Well,
thing?
to be honest, Barry, I'm not I'm not on social media. I'm not like on so I quit social media on my 40th birthday. I was six, no, 5.5 years ago. So like I don't get this whole new TikTok thing. I'm just not in that world at all. So for me, it was I had it closed off. Like it was me, the Racing Post, and the Racing Post website, and then you would listen to other podcasts and take other tipsters stuff on board. But I was never into this. I think I always had quite a high bar for bullshit when it came to anything like that. So and the other thing you were saying there, do you know what? When I said I have 5 to 10 bets a week, though that would be on a mundane just week when not much is happening. But when the Cheltenham Festival rolls around, then it's I mean because the clubs are off, all rules went out the window then. And the Cheltenham Festival is kind of like my speciality, but I just like I would be tipping horses like from the Saturday after the festival's ended for the following year's festival, and then all roads led to Cheltenham. But it's like the crack cocaine of gamblers. It's like Disneyland for adult men. It's just this. It's so weird. It's the rules just go out the window, and it can be like all those festivals like Cheltenham, Royal Ascot, Glorious Goodwood, Galway Festival. It's a dangerous week. It can be risk and reward, and it can be very profitable, but you can really go in like lose a lot of money if it goes tits up, and that's ultimately what happened to me in 2022. But sorry, I think I've gone off on another one there. So
No, no, good. Yeah, so like, yeah, Cheltenham, you're right. It is like Disneyland for adults. Like, and that thing, it's so pervasive. Like, across the island of Ireland, like it's just people go bananas for it, and there's a build up to it, weeks and weeks and weeks, and there's all these kind of, tipster kind of meet up, kind of live events where tipsters and former jockeys will give their tips for Cheltenham, and people will pay to go to these things. And people take the week off work. People save up the entire year for their gambling and drinking budget. People obviously go over to Cheltenham. It's nuts. Like, I mean, for people, let's say outside of the Ireland and the UK, if you don't know what Cheltenham is, yeah, it's just this bananas festival of racing in Cheltenham in England, but there's this huge Irish connection to it, and there's also this thing of the Irish trainers wanting to beat the British trainers over there, which they often do across all of the races in Cheltenham, and huge amounts of Irish people go to it. It's kind of it's a festival of horse racing, gambling for 4 days, right? And a lot of drinking, and probably a lot of other stuff as well. Um, Okay, so I mean the rules would go out the window during Cheltenham. So would you start doing silly stuff? Like would you do kind of
no,
more addictive type stuff?
when I say the rules, basically my two rules, my two golden rules were that I record every single bet in a profit and loss in the big A4 diary. So and I didn't fudge it. So that's how I kept track of my bets. And the other rule was I don't bet shorter than 2 to 1 on a horse. So they were my golden rules. But when Cheltenham came around, it was like, you know, there's you've been studying these races for months and months and months, and then the bookies are offering like 6 paces for the handicap. So you'll maybe back 4 or 5 horses in the one race, because you're getting such good each way terms. And then there's 28 races, and you end up, you're ultimately going to win a few. And I always had a good record in day one, which my members and Facebook love because it got everyone off their flyer and tipped a few like really big price horses on day one over the years. But then you end up even the races you don't have a big interest in, you end up just backing horses just because you're on a roll sort of thing. But there's plenty of times like I finished the Cheltenham Festival and I'd be sitting on my bed at the end of the week and I would have like a wad of cash and a few grand on like Betfair account or whatever. And I would just feel completely and utterly deflated. And that's the thing that I kind of always knew, that it's not about the money. I think most of your guests will probably say that, that phrase, it's not about the money. And with me, it was never about the money, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, I just didn't really know any other way of life because I've been conditioned from when I was, very young to like this. If you want to go back to right back to like my first ever sort of experience with gambling, which was in 1990 when the World Cup, Italia 90 was the World Cup was on, and me and my family were going over to Scotland for a holiday, and on the ferry over, I remember watching these like sort of alcoholic men with cigarettes pumping the pound coins into the fruit machines, and I was just completely transfixed in this. I think I've always been like a bit of a dopamine junkie, just that addicted or not attracted to risk and reward. Like even go back to like panini stickers, the football stickers and teddy picker machines, in the supermarkets. Like I couldn't wait to get my pocket money. Like, and I did a paper round where the Mr. Crossan, the news agent, would give me like £4.80, and I would just hand it straight back to him and say, "Give me as many panini stickers as you want, just to complete my book." So I always had that. But in 1990, I was just transfixed in these fruit machines on the ferry over, and then when we got the Capitol Hotel in Edinburgh, there was a fruit machine in the bar, and I asked my mum and dad, could I put my pound pocket money in the fruit machine? And for some reason, they granted my illegal request and let me. I think they're probably trying to teach me a lesson, but straight away, like 3 cherries fell. And I had the choice, collect or gamble. I hit gamble, so £1, then £2, and then I hit collect, and that was it. Like, but there's something inside me, just it was like a Coke bottle, just shaking up, and there's this fizz. It's almost like an orgasmic experience, just this lava bubbling inside me, the thrill it gave me, and then I couldn't wait to feel that way again. But that didn't really. But I always, like I said before, I sort of had a sort of low bar for bullshit. That I sort of realized quite early on that these machines were for bandits. So, obviously the club proprietors don't put these in if they're not making money from them. So I sort of ditched the whole machine thing, and then around the mid 90s, I started doing sports betting. But there's a big difference between 1996 and 2026, because like it was, for the vast majority of people, it was just a bit of fun back then. So we would play football on a Saturday afternoon, and me and my mates would meet in Stanley Racing Bookmakers, which then became William Hill, then became Boyd Sports. And you just do your weekly accumulator, and then even if the bet won, you couldn't go around and collect it, because the winnings wouldn't be ready until Monday afternoon usually. So you had that cooling off period, which you certainly don't have now. So now when I go back to the same club 30 years later, all the young lads are there on their phones, and yet you've still got Soccer Saturday on. I know you love Soccer Saturday, but there is like a lot of men absolutely love that show, and I did as well. There was always a buzz like in the 90s when you finished your match, and then you went back and you ticked off your accumulator, and then everyone went home and there was no more thought about it. Now obviously you still got your degenerates in the bookie shops, betting on horses or whatever all day until the shutters came down. But for most people it was just like a once a week flutter. But these days it's like, as soon as your accumulator, like one team's letting you down, you can go on and play. You've got Ray Winston and Peter Crouch and Danny Dyer on the TV telling you, you can get odds and this, odds and that. And then when the 3 o'clock games finish, then you've got the half-dive games, you've got the European games. If you're in a taxi on the back way home from town in the middle of the night, you can bet in India and Australian cricket down under, or Thai tennis match. It just this thing never sleeps now, and I think for for anyone with a young, a young adult as a child, just who grew up in my era thinking it's a bit of fun. This is a completely different beast we're dealing with now, and this is why it's the addiction's so much on the rise.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, I was turned 18 in 1990, so none of my mates had the faintest interest in gambling, not on the Grand National, not channel, nothing. It was just like that was alphas did that. Like it was just a nothing burger, and betting shops were the most boring, grim places on earth as far as pretty much everybody in my friend group was concerned. But then you fast forward like 15, 20 years, like everybody in that age group is mad into gambling and it's everywhere and there's endless gambling opportunities and it's cool and it's sexy and you've all these celebrities and yeah, the shift in it has been extremely radical in a relatively well, that is a long time, but in a relatively short space of time, considering how long gambling's been around for. Claire, any thoughts or questions?
I was one in 1990, Barry.
I'm very old,
You're
Claire.
very old. Um, yeah, yeah, interesting. I used to, like yourself, Niall, get the racing post. I loved horse racing, did it, for years. And I never got the tipster thing because I was too arrogant and thought, sure, they can't read the form any better than I can. Like, what do they know that I don't know? I'm realizing now how much of an arrogant arsehole I really was as as a gambler. But yeah, interesting because it would never have crossed my mind to follow a tipster. The other thing that stood out to me or sent me off on a little thought tangent there was when you said about the degenerate gamblers in the bookies who keep going, all day betting. Like that was me. Do you know what I mean? And we have this idea that it's well, I don't know. I have this idea that it's a guy in a Hawaiian shirt with shorts and scraggly hair that's the degenerate gambler. But actually, we're all probably that because even if it's not in the bookies where everyone can see you being that, it's you at home all day on your phone placing those bets. I mean, 5 to 10 bets a week, like that was me in 10 minutes. You know, that to me is control. So yeah, it is very interesting to kind of hear your perspective because it is different probably than what we usually have on this as well. um but I mean, how how hard was it to stop, do you think? Like how hard was it to say goodbye to all of this?
Oh, uh, pretty hard, yeah, because there's that, you have that like sunk cost fallacy. You've been doing it for 15 years, and you think like, what am I without this? And I've put so much of my life into this. And I know Tony's talked about this before, about the time you lose and the opportunity. So yeah, in 2022, then it was a roller coaster of all roller coasters of years. So it started on Cheltenham Festival was great. Made a good profit as you usually did at Cheltenham, and then I backed Cameron Smith to win the Open Golf, and he beat Rory McIlroy by a couple of shots. So that won me about 1,500 quid, and then going into Goodwood Galway week, which is risk and reward on steroids. I had a lot of success in the past, but I've also had bad weeks, and it just knocks the stuffing out of you. But this week I could not get anything right, and it started off small stakes. I could have about £3,000, to bet with, and not big bets. But there was a couple of horses where there's a horse called Lord Redford that was in the 5 furlong sprint that I was going to back 10-1, but by the time I got into boys sports, he was 5-1, so I just left it. And then I thought I'll be disciplined and not back it. And then when I checked the results later, he had bolted up, and his price had drifted back out to 10-1. And because boys sports were offering best odds guaranteed, I would have been paid out at 10-1, right? And that would have given me a profitable day. But as it was, I was like £340 down. And he rolled into day two, and once again, there was a horse, what's it called, Linden B, in one of the last races at Goodwood. And again, it was 25-1 in the morning. But when I went into boys sports, it'd been backed off some big tipster put it up now. It'd been backed off the boards into 10-1, and I thought, no, you've missed the price. Don't do it. And then once again, I checked the results later, and he had won, and I had backed a whole load of other bets throughout the day, which had lost. So that just psychologically, that my mind just went into complete turmoil. Then just miss. I think that's the worst thing, missing out on a horse that you would have, if you have a horse that falls at the first fence, or there's nothing you can do. But if you miss out on a horse or something that you were going to back, it torments you. So then I sort of, like I say, hit the fuck it button, and then the bets get bigger. I started chasing, and over the years I have been pretty disciplined. But by the end of the week, like by day 5 of Glorious Goodwood, I was down to the bare bones of my bank account. And then I was telling myself, right, if this goes tits up today, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore, or something has to change. And then by the end of it, I was just like, and even I think it was back in horses, like you get 2-1 that were starting odds on. I thought, I've beaten the book. I'm not doing anything wrong here, but just had no winners. And then I was at the end of the week, I was left with I was down to 40 pounds left in my bank account, and then I just like I was just a beaten man. And I remember sitting across from my wife at dinner, like, and she's chatting to me about how was your day at work, and I'm not listening to a word she was saying. I'm just miles away, and I was like, she was like, "You're not listening to me now," and I was like, "Oh, no, I was, Billy, I was honestly I was thinking about work," and she's just like saying, "Oh, you got to stop thinking about work. You got to leave your work in the office. You can't take that home with you." And it's moments like that where I just felt the biggest piece of shit on earth, because my lovely wife's just asked me how my day was. And little does she know I'm just being consumed by this, and I've just lost all the money I had from 5 days ago. So then I came up with this brilliant moderation plan. Then on the week after Goodwood, um, where I was only going to bet £100 a week, and that was it. That was my limit, £100. And I think every sort of problem gambler's had these genius ideas, like my cunning plan. So I was going to record it all in a notebook. I bought myself a new notebook. Like, I already had a ton of them in my drawer, but I had to have a new one, to symbolize this fresh start. And so I was going to do 1 or 2 horses a week. That was it. So the first 2 weeks, the horses lost, and then I was like, right, just mark it all up. And then I planned to put any, no matter what, I would put 50 to £100 I got paid weekly, so I was going to put that in the savings account and then build this money up. And then if I have any winnings from the horse race, I was going to add it to my savings account too. But then week 3 came along, and it was the York Ebor Festival, and there's a horse called Blue for You who I really fancied. So I put the whole £50 each way on this horse at 7-1. And it came from the clouds and won by a head. And then it felt like the biggest winner of my life, because I've been on such a long losing run from Goodwood to Galway. And of course, it was £520, which was nothing in the grand scheme of things, but that just put me straight back in the game. My moderation scheme just went out the window. So as the dude, so for the next sort of 5-6 months, I was just back at the races, just in the old routine, and I had some success, some loses, and then on the eve of my 42nd birthday, I done, and the World Cup in Qatar was on, so I had a few bets in the World Cup, in November that year, and then had some stupid bets, and then just a series of losers, and then so I woke up on my 42nd birthday, and I was down to the bare bones, and I was just like looking at myself in the mirror saying, how the hell are you here again? And then my next thought was, right, I better find the winner today. So I backed one of Willie Mullins' horses, Classical Dream, who was running against the unbeaten mare Honeysuckle, who was odds on. And he beat her, but then a horse of Gordon Elliott's came from the clouds and nutted him on the line, Teapu at 20-1. So I was like, oh God, nothing's going right. So I reinvested another 50 quid and put a double on England and France in the football, and that bet won. So it got me like £272 back. But I was just like, usually I would be like, right, I'm back in the game, happy days. I can, it's only a small win, but I can use that to reinvest. But there's just something just changed in me that it was like an epiphany, just that this never ends. It's just you might get back in the game. You might like if I've been like, I'm winning, for 2, 3 years, but at some stage I'm going to go on a bad run and I'm going to lose this money again, and it's never my money. And and I just looked at myself, thought, what do I have to show for this? It's 15 years and I'm here yet again. I've no betting accounts, online betting accounts I can bet with. I've no money, and there's just no fulfillment in it whatsoever. And by this stage, I'd stopped the Facebook tipping because I deleted my social media accounts, 2 years prior, but I wasn't getting that adulation anymore, and it was just time to pull the plug. And I actually read Patrick, Patrick Foster's Might Bite. So that month, when I decided on the back of reading that book that I was gonna take a month off gambling, and yeah, that month became 3 months, and then I came back for the Cheltenham Festival in 2023. I actually logged back on the Facebook and did my whole tipping column because I haven't done it for a few years. And I had a really successful week, and I was getting a lot of smoke blown up my ass from my members. Oh, now it's great to have you back, and they all called me the king of Cheltenham and all this. And I was like, I lapped it up like a brat on X Factor. But then, I just again, I just had this realization that this is not. It's yes, it's good now, but it's fake highs. I'm mistaking fake highs for happiness, and eventually it's going to end badly. And that's where I just then started looking more and more into addiction. Read Tony's book, read Oisin McConville's book, Paul Merton's book, Stacey Goodwin's book, and even the egomaniac in me was saying, I was sort of poo-hooing like these idiots, and they're gambling, and then I realized, like, well, why I'm no different, really. I was going through all the same psychological torment they went through. The self-loathing, the feeling of invincibility after a good run. The despair and the depression after a bad run. The delusions of moderation. It just all it was, apart from my records showing me that I was profitable for best part of 10 years. I still had nothing to show for it, so I was just as every bit as addicted as those guys were. And I have to thank Tony and all those other authors because and your podcast too, by the way, because back in 2022, that's when I started listening to the Problem Gambling podcast, when it was just you and Tony, Barry, and it was so helpful. And you just, no matter whose story you're listening to, you can just relate to all the, uh, and my story is different, but if the mind tennis of it all, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, that like the identity piece is really important. Like, I mean, if you got people like you said blowing smoke and you're the king of Cheltenham, and that's a nice feeling, like, and you don't have to have like a tipping Facebook group or some other online group. You could just be the guy in the office that people turn to for tips at Cheltenham, because a lot of my clients over the years, when they're in recovery, they have to stop being the guy who gives out tips at Cheltenham, right? Even though they've been that guy for the last 10 years or 20 years, because they're not trying not to talk about gambling or backing horses, and they're trying to recover from their gambling problem. So there's that identity change piece is a big piece, because you can start thinking, well, that defines me and that's who I am, and that's where I get a lot of my kind of self-esteem from and all these other really important things. And then you try and switch it off and you go, oh fuck, where am I gonna get all these good things from? So that's really important. But then, like, before we finish up today, like, one of the things that I know you kind of start off saying we won't get into kind of bookie bashing, and I'm not trying to do that necessarily, but yeah, like for people out there, let's say loads of people I've worked with over the years, they start out gambling, early big win. Tony talks about it in his book. This is easy. His first bet, he wins a double, turns a pound into £40, I think it was at the time. It's a good return on a bet, not bad, 40 to 1. And people start thinking, this is easy. I could do this professionally now. I've worked with loads and loads of people on the sports betting side who thought they could do it professionally. Now, in your experience, is it possible to succeed at doing that? Because my understanding of it is the game is rigged and it's almost impossible for a person to succeed and be profitable long term at sports betting because you touched on earlier on, they'll restrict your bets on things that you're good at, or they'll just shut down your account. Right? So
So,
is it a runner? Is it
well,
possible?
there's all sort of Machiavellian, techniques to get around it. Commission agents, which I used as well. Pay people 10%. You open up a Bet365 account for me. I was shameless about that. Just like asked family members, my mother-in-law, even my work colleagues. They open up Bet365 accounts for me, but one by one they all get shut down. Um, is it? Like technically it is possible, and I think bookmakers though, if you're betting on, say, football, they don't really care because Cape Verde can draw with Spain and Argentina, the European and World Championships, as we've just seen.
Yeah.
Footballs, but there's a lot more. As Claire probably know, there is a lot. Like, horse racing there is more of a science to it, and the horse racing punters can be profitable if you put the work in and you're disciplined. It is possible to turn a profit, but you're not allowed to. So and like
That's the important
and
part.
yeah, but like I've opened accounts, Barry, with bookmakers, and within five losing bets, I'm banned, closed, or restricted.
Losing
It
bets.
five losing bets. Now, if I show that I'm betting on horse racing, like five horse racing bets, and I've backed horses that started 20, at 20 to 1, started 8 to 1 or something, like I'll be closed. That has happened to me a few times, and like Aaron Rogan speaks about it. You've had on before, in his book
Yeah.
Punters. He speaks about the FEM, the future expected margin that the algorithms have in Paddy Power, and and I think more as technology moves forward, I think more and more winning punters are shut down even quicker now. Now there is a side note to this, which isn't really. I think people generally know that there's betting restrictions, but something that isn't spoken about, which is I read about in the book, is what I refer to as hush money, which is those within the racing media, say in the Racing Post or on Racing UK or at the races, pundits and tipsters do not get the same restrictions that the average bloke in the street does. So their accounts, they'll be allowed to bet with Gay Abandon, with Bet365, Paddy Power, or whoever, because they know that the bookies know that they don't want them to kick up a fuss, if they're getting restricted.
Yeah.
So so a lot of these tipsters and pundits and Racing Post staff come on podcasts and they read out all these prices for, say, on Saturday for Saturday afternoon on a Friday, and like, there's thousands of punters like me out there just like, who are these prices for? Because we can't get on these prices. You guys can, but we're all there's no chance of us getting on. So, and I always think, like, if these guys are sort of winning tipsters, if they're in that sort of 4% bracket of gamblers that actually win, I think it's like horse racing gamblers that win is about 4%. Um, you can almost certainly bet they're every bit as addicted to what I was, because you need to be it needs to be pretty much a full-time occupation. Like I was never arrogant or probably good enough to go to do it um professionally, and I never had any sort of uh goal to do it professionally. It was always like a side hustle for me. But I think it's impossible not to be addicted to it if you're tipping, you know, is that if that's your job pretty much. So, and then if the kind bookmakers like saying, oh, you can bet with us, it's no problem. You can have whatever, you can have the price that's stated in the Racing Post. These guys are just going to turn a blind eye to the thousands of hunters on the street. And it actually came to head in 2017, where I wrote an email to Kevin Blake of At the Races, because he's one of the few pundits that was says this is really bad for the game. These restrictions, we've got to do something about it. And he's a good guy, Kevin. So he went on, and debated some of the bookmaker representatives on ATR and at the races, and he asked the viewers to send in emails or the disgruntled punters. So I sent an email to him, and then I later forwarded on to Bruce Millington, who was the editor of the Racing Post. Um, and to be fair to Bruce, he went to Parliament to discuss the issue. But the problem is with the Racing Post and Racing TV and at the races and all these racing media, it's the bookmakers. They're married to the bookmakers. The bookmakers sponsor them, so they're just puppets on a string. You can't bite the hand that feeds you, pretty much. So yeah, it's just a bit of an incestuous and seedy affair going on there with the racing pundits and the racing media with the bookmakers, while the rest of us have to pick up the scraps.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, like you said, you know, even if the restrictions weren't there, you still would have had some sort of unhealthy relationship with gambling that probably would have led you to a point where you thought, well, I need to knock this on the head for my mental health and for the benefit of my relationships and my general well-being. And even if you were making money out of it, even if they didn't restrict you or didn't kind of boot you off the platforms because of the level of preoccupation. I suppose credit to you as well, because I think it's harder to find your rock bottom when you're not having substantial
Mm.
financial losses. For most people, the rock bottom is strongly, not only, it's not the only thing, but strongly connected to substantial financial losses, racking up debt, the impact that will have on important relationships and so on. So, like, to find your rock bottom without having, the substantial financial losses is no mean feat. So, like, fair play for doing that, and fair play for coming out and telling your story. We need to go really quickly, but when is the book due out, Niall, so people can get their hands on it?
It's the publication date is the 20th of January 2027. So it's got it's in the copy editing phase at the minute. So and we've got to get the cover design. It's quite a complicated process. The book I finished the book like a year ago, but it's just and I absolutely love writing it. I'm very proud of it. But I wanted my book to be a bit different. It's an entertaining read, but I also, like you're saying there, Barry, I don't want it to, I wanted to say to people, you don't have to have a rock bottom, but there's no fulfilling end game
Yeah.
in this for you. It's like that Desmond Tutu saying, we've got to stop pulling people out of the river and go upstream and find out why they're falling in, sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I just want it's just a warning to any aspiring gamblers that even if you get good at this, you're screwed. It's not going to end well.
Yeah. Which is probably fair,
Mm,
and now the vast, vast, vast majority of people will never get good at it. That's the
mm,
first thing. But there is a like percentage, well, not good enough to make a profit out of it. But there is that percentage of people who will, like, more than likely just burn themselves out. Like, even if they're in that kind of whatever percentile of people who can win, being a net profit at the end of a calendar year. Like, what's the emotional load? Like, what's the
yeah.
emotional psychological price that you're paying for that? What impact is it having on your relationships? Just because there's a few quid in the bank account at the end of the year, like, is the juice worth the squeeze?
And that's the thing. Though, my life is so much better now. Without it, without the mental torment. And I just want to say to people that there is. It's so hard when you've been doing it. You've been conditioned into this is where sort of happiness resides. But it's just conditioning. I know, Claire, I think I've heard you saying that the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to do it's now. And just, I think that's such a good way to look at it. Just because even my love of sport has come back. I know Tony's spoken about that before. It's just that my love of sport, watching sport without a financial interest, it's just come back, and I'm so much more content and happy now. And there's just a much better world and life out there for you without gambling. So
Brilliant. Now I better run. We better get back to the day jobs here. But listen, thanks a million for coming on, and thank you, listener and viewer, for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you all next time.